what's the number one thing you start with to help them start to shift their mindset?
This is where real change happens. One of the most powerful things, I think, for all of us, help them answer the question of who they are.
You can lead the horse to water. And so what do you do?
I think the key to all of this is communicate.
But what do you recommend for people to have those difficult, sometimes painful conversations about the reality of what's happening in somebody's life?
You don't come with being nice, you come at them with being kind. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. If I could share one powerful truth to everyone listening right now and watching this, here's what I would tell you.
Welcome to the Leadership and Love podcast. We will cover leadership, mindset, personal development, and sales and marketing. You will experience thought-provoking conversations with both nationally and internationally recognized leaders. Our goal is to inspire you and deliver actionable items that you can implement that are going to help you accelerate your growth. Get ready to discover the magic and the power when you lead with love.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Leadership and Love. I'm really excited for our guest today. His name is Todd Sylvester. I'm going to give him an introduction in just a minute. But here's a guy who's playing full out from his heart. He's a been there, done that guy. And as it turns out, a lot of people that end up on the podcast are just that. They've been there, done that. People who've kind of come from the darkness to the light, from the muck to the happiness. And so he's got some powerful stuff he's going to share with us today. And I'm also going to kind of twist his arm because I want you to understand that everything he's going to share with us can be applied to so many different areas and relationships in both your personal life and your business. Todd serves as a formidable mental fitness coach, specializing in assisting individuals wrestling with addiction, anxiety, depression, self-esteem issues, and more. And who doesn't suffer with any of that at some point in their life? He offers personalized mentoring services to clients both locally and internationally. Todd also earned his SUDC, Substance Use Disorder Counseling degree from Utah Valley University. Distinguished for his remarkable ability to establish trust quickly, Todd has guided many individuals over their path to recovery, rediscovering happiness, and achieving positive behavioral shifts. His unique gift lies in connecting deeply with individuals, helping them unearth their authentic motivations for change. That's powerful stuff right there. Unearthing their authentic motivations for change, and thus becoming the catalyst for lasting lifestyle improvements. Todd's profound influence on others finds its origin in his own personal story, a transformation that carried him from self-hatred and despair to faith and recovery. Transitioning from a belief of being broken to a profound understanding of his state as recovered, in parentheses, Todd draws on his personal journey through addiction. He forges authentic connections with thousands of teenagers, young adults, and parents, instilling hope within them. So Todd, first off, thank you very much and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So one of the things I'd like to start with, we're going to focus today mostly on mindset, around mindset. So I'd like you to share with our listeners, what's when you start working with clients, what's the number one thing you start with to help them start to shift their mindset?
Well, you first have to identify what is your current mindset. And I think being aware of the narrative or the story that we tell ourselves, I often share this powerful truth that the most powerful force in the human psyche is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And so with my clients, I'm helping them unravel what's the current narrative, what's the current story you're saying about yourself. And then once we establish that, there's an awareness around that. Once you have the awareness, now we can start going after it, right? Going after change. And so we first have to be aware. If we're not aware of what the current narrative is, we can say, yeah, my narrative is negative, but I get down to the specifics. What are you actually telling yourself? And so it's kind of a very vulnerable exercise, but it gets people right to where we need to be. And then it's a kind of a foundation for us to move forward.
So, right, we must be brothers from different mothers, because I completely agree with you. I think that once we have awareness, we're about 65% of the way home, right? Because until we know, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
What's one of the things that you tell or share with your clients around the story?
Well, again, that's what's dictating all their behavior. I work with a lot of, drug addicts and alcoholics, people who suffer from depression, anxiety, a lot of different issues. But typically, I'll tell them, like when I'm working with a drug addict, I'll say, you don't have a drug problem, you have a thinking problem. And so they look at me like, what? I've never heard anyone say it like that. I go, yeah. So you're doing drugs to mask this story or this belief system you have about yourself. And so I already know right off the bat that's what we need to address. And so again, back to your point, bringing the awareness to where they're currently at and what they're telling themselves. And so this is where real change happens, because I could tell them quit doing drugs. And they're like, I know that, Todd. Well, I don't even worry about that. Let's go in and find out what's the current narrative, which creates beliefs, which dictate the behavior. Once we identify that and we start changing the beliefs, that behavior of doing drugs goes away automatically. They just do it on their own, and it's like magic.
That's awesome. So he's coming out of the gate with some just pure gold here, and I want you are, because people don't understand this, right? What the stories going on in our brain is creating this illusion that's not really the truth, but we say that the story over and over. But what I want to reiterate for our listeners, what he said is, you don't have a drug problem, you have a thinking problem. Now, I'd like you to think about how you can, I always want these podcasts for our listeners to be able to go away with something they can do today. I'd like you to apply that to you personally. Todd, that if we said nothing else and ended right here, that's worth the price of admission alone. So I'd like our listeners, you don't have a problem with your employees, you have a thinking problem. You don't have a problem with your children, you have a thinking problem. You don't have a problem with the economy, you have a thinking problem. One of the things I share is there's people making lots of money in every economy, right? That's a thinking thing. So once you've got them to understand that, what are the next steps that you share with them to start shifting their mindset? How do you help them get the thoughts that they want to think about, or the vision or the picture they want?
Yeah, great question. So once we identify what the current narrative is, which is typically 95% negative, is now let's create a new narrative. What would you want to say about yourself, or what would you really want to believe about yourself? And so I have them actually really honestly break down a list of, call them statements or an affirmation or a power statement, where these are the things I want. So for instance, it might say, I taught him honest. I taught him a good person. I taught him powerful. I taught matter. I taught him lovable, right? And I can make a list of these things. So even though I may not fully believe any of that yet, because I've been so stuck in this other narrative, this negative narrative, but we have to start somewhere, right? And so we have to form a new statement, a new story, if you will, that I now need to work on focusing on as I move forward. And so it's really basic stuff, but it really is the foundation of creating change and creating a new narrative. We have to start with a simple list like that even.
I want our listeners to catch that. Again, basically what Todd's talking about, our brain's much like a computer, right? Right now it's running a program over and over that's been negative. You have to override that, and you get to pick. That's very powerful, Todd, because they do get to choose what they want to put in, right?
Yes.
One of the things I love to share with people is I'll ask, I do some professional speaking. I'll ask the room, what was your first thought this morning? Most people can't remember it, but you can pick that first thought the night before.
Yeah.
I'm young, happy, healthy, powerful, and successful. That's what, and that rolls off my lips because I've been saying it for so many years.
Yeah.
And now this is a very rich conversation, and I truly love your heart. I'd like you to let's go deeper in this. So when you're working with your clients and the proverbial bump in the road hits, and it's so easy to go back to the old habit, right? The old story. What do you do, one, to help them realize that those things are going to happen? And two, what's the second thing that you share with them to get them back on track?
Well, again, stepping back a little bit to one of the most powerful things I think for all of us, but what I do with my clients is help them answer the question of who they are. So, for instance, I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this for 35 years. When I ask a client, hey, who are you? They can't answer it. They have no idea. So that's another thing that I add to this. And here's why I'm saying this, because to your question, what do we do when we have a bump in the road? When we have a bump in a road, in that moment when I'm struggling, or we have a struggle, or we're having something that's really taking us in the wrong direction, I have to remind myself of who I am, right? And a really simple way of doing this, and this is for the listeners too, if you think of a baby learning to walk, right? So for instance, when a baby falls down, what do? They get back up. Then they fall down and they get back up. They do this over and over and over and again. So if we were watching a baby learning to walk, and we were to come up with 5 characteristics of a baby learning to walk, we would say they have discipline, they have belief, they have the will to never give up, they have strength, they have courage, right? The list goes on, right? And then if you ask yourself, well, where did the babies get those characteristics? The answer always goes back to, well, they were born with them. And so then I'll say, well, what does that mean about you? And it's like, well, I was born with them too. Exactly. So that's who you really are. So you're courageous, brave, strong, the will to never give up. It's in your DNA. So in those moments when I'm having a rough time, what I teach my clients is now go back to who you are. In that rough moment, who are you? Well, when I say these things, it helps me have a solid foundation as I move through the difficult thing or a difficult trial or what have you, without me blowing up my life again.
Oh my God, that's just so rich. That's brilliant, Todd. Seriously, that's brilliant. I want our listeners to catch that. Again, what he said is the truth. It's funny. I believe that we come in this as this clean white sheet, right? We come in believing everything's possible. And I'll like to share this with you and our listeners. One of the things I've come to understand, what do parents do with a baby? When they get it to walk and talk, when it takes those first steps, or it says mama, or they call everybody. They tell the whole world, you're not going to believe it. Little Todd walked today. Little Todd said, mama, dada. And then it starts. Don't run with the scissors. Don't climb on the cabinets. Don't touch the stove. Don't pull your sister's hair. And all that stuff starts being piled on the truth of who we are, right? The truth that we are courageous, that we are loved, that we are kind. You can put any 2 babies together, doesn't matter where they come from in the world, doesn't matter what color, they're going to play, because nobody's taught them racism or bigotry or hatred. They don't know those things. So that's just brilliant. That's really who we all come in that way.
Absolutely. And what happens is we get older, we don't lose, we forget. So when I'm with a client, all I'm doing is reminding of them of what they have forgotten. And once they're again, the awareness, like, oh yeah, I am that. Okay. And one of the best definitions I've ever heard of depression is pretending to be someone you're not. So when I veer off of this, or I forget who I am, right? I'm always left empty. I feel depressed, right? When I get back in line with who I really am, that's where peace is. That's where love is. That's where a surety is,
Yeah. So for those of you that are listening and not watching, Todd just held up both his hands back to back, and he moved one aside and he left one in the middle. And that middle is truly our center. And what he showed was that when you're depressed or anxious or stressed or whatever that is, you've drifted from the truth of who you really are. And that awareness of who you are brings you back to that. Todd, and I love that you have so much experience and then you've had such huge success. If you were to address a room full of leaders, and I believe everybody's a leader, right? I believe everybody's the light and love that you're talking about. That's how we come in, and I think it's very powerful that we remember that. What would your advice be to parents, teachers, business owners, managers on how to help other people find that truth and at the same time hold theirs, right? Because often our peace we believe somebody takes our peace from us, but we give it to them, right? By our triggers. What would your advice be to those leaders?
Well, again, if you're a leader, don't just share a message, be the message, right? We one of the hardest things I'll never forget, when I finally got clean and sober from my addictions, I knew I wanted to help other people. And my mentor at the time said, you know what the hardest thing for you to do will be, if that's what you want to do? And I'm like, what? And he says, practice what you preach. And he was right. I was like, I found myself early on, years ago, when I would share stuff with clients or an audience that I was speaking to, I would walk off the stage and go, you know what? I'm telling them to do all these things and I'm not even doing it. So I've taken great pride over the years to make sure if I'm going to share something with someone, I'm actually doing it myself. So I'm not just the message, I am the message by the way I live my life. And I think that as a leader is where it really starts. If I'm telling my employees, if you will, to be honest, to have integrity, to be accountable, to help people, if I'm not doing that myself, it's going to fall on deaf ears and they're going to resent even the message, because like, well, you don't do that. But if I'm living it and I share that, then they go, you know what? I want to be like that. Todd's got something right here. Does that make sense? So that's where it starts, is with us living and being the message that we're going to share.
That's, again, another golden nugget for our listeners. Walk the walk. I really love the work you're doing, and I'd like to share something. I had a stepson that drank himself to death at the age of 33. And it was, and he had the opportunity to play professional baseball, and his addictions got the best of him from a young man. You can lead the horse to water, right? And so what do you do in the case where the individual you're working with, and again, whether it's one of your children, an employee, somebody that's struggling with addiction, what do you do when they're busy going down the path of destruction and you can't help them?
Well, yeah, that's a really tough scenario, because I wish there was this beautiful magic answer to trying to get someone to change their life. And we all know this, that the only person that can change you is you. But that doesn't mean I still can't influence this person. So I think the key to all of this is communicate. If you have a loved one or an employee or a friend or a family member who's struggling, a lot of times we avoid the conversation because it's uncomfortable, that kind of thing. But I think that's where we got to break through and get uncomfortable and have some tough conversations. Now, again, it really does come down to the individual. If they want to change, they're going to have to put in the work. And I'll say that to my clients all the time. I can't want this more than you do, right? But I will walk the walk with you, but you have to walk it with me, right? And if you'll walk it with me, I guarantee you, your life will change. If you don't walk, it doesn't matter what I say to you. And so that's a tough one, because we can't force anyone to change. But what we can do, that's why being the message is so powerful. If I'm sharing with my clients, hey, I want you to be doing this and living these principles, if they see Todd doing it, that's going to be a greater influence on their change than we can realize. So I think communicating that is key, even though they may refuse the message. They might do that for a long time, and unfortunately some of them just don't ever listen to that message and don't get the help. But we got to keep trying. We got to keep being that influence.
So for our listeners, he just said something very powerful, and I'd like to answer this. You're raising a bunch of just amazing questions for me, Todd.
Yeah.
A lot of people are afraid of those difficult conversations, right? Those, I call them the come to Jesus meeting, right? Where we're gonna put it out there. We're just gonna say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm feeling. How would you recommend that people have the, and maybe this goes back to like who they are, but what do you recommend for people to have those difficult, sometimes painful conversations about the reality of what's happening in somebody's life?
Well, again, if we really care about someone, we need to talk to them about these things, because think about this. And I know we say, well, no, I care about these people. Well, then we've got to get uncomfortable and sit them down. It's almost like if I was reaching out to you, I'd say, hey, I noticed that you're struggling. Do you got a minute? Can we talk for a minute? I'm saying this because I care about you. It's all your approach. You come with that loving heart, but you don't come with being nice. You come at them with being kind, because nice just kind of, you placate and you enable. But if I'm kind, I'm going to tell you the hard truths.
Please repeat that. That's flipping magical. Seriously, please repeat that for everybody listening.
Yeah, huge difference between being kind and nice. Nice is I'm going to placate to whatever you're doing. I'm going to enable your behavior because I'm just being nice because I don't want to offend you. But kind is assertive. Kind is I'm going to tell you the truth about what's going on. So it's about me being kind to the person I say I care about, not nice, right? I'll say this to my clients all the time. When I first meet with a client, I go, I can be honest with you or I can be nice. Which one do you want? And they'll always say, I want you to be honest. And I'll say, honest doesn't always feel nice. So we have to, that's the difference there. And so having these tough conversations, yes, it's uncomfortable, but then get uncomfortable because it can save their life.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And so I'd like to, boy, I could just sit with that for the rest of the day. That's just, seriously, that's such profound wisdom, because you're absolutely right. I've never heard anybody describe it that way. And you need to make a big billboard and put it up everywhere, because it's so true, right? We're not, yeah, you look great today, even though you're, 100 pounds overweight, right? Or, you're kind of a little wacky, but I appreciate your weird personality, even though you're doing cocaine all damn day, right? Whatever it may be. And it's some, and so I'd like to step back, and maybe this should have been the first question I asked. I'd like you to describe, because I don't think people realize all the things that we can get addicted to. And so could you cover those, just so people are aware, especially in today's world, of all the things that they can be addicted to?
Well, I mean, yeah, the list is a mile long. Obviously, you have your, the ones that come to mind right off the bat are, drugs and alcohol and things like that. But I see people get addicted to holding on to their trauma for the rest of their life. I see people get addicted to wanting to play small in life. I see people become addicted to believing that they're no good. We are so powerful that we can convince ourselves that we're powerless. And we buy into playing small. I see that to me is one of the biggest ones of all, is that we just play small in life. We just cower down. I've been through hell. I've been through all this trauma, and I heard it said once, and I thought this was so beautiful. Your past trauma wasn't your fault, but it's your responsibility to heal from it. And if we do that, right, we start playing big again in our life. And it's uncomfortable because we're not used to doing that. And so what do is we hold on to it. We don't want to let it go. And I think I just see people get stuck in kind of that area. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things out there that you can become addicted to. And I think it really comes back down to, it's not really, it's a way for us to avoid what's really going on. And what it is we're poisoning ourselves with false beliefs about ourselves. It goes back to the narrative. That's why when you change the narrative, all these things that can, you can become addicted to, you have power over it all of a sudden, because you've changed the story back to the truth of who you really are. And who are we really? We are love. We are light. We are energy. We are powerful. We are strong. We are brave. We are tenacious. And we all knew that when we were little kids. We had it. We had it figured out when we were little. But, we become adults and we get, desensitized, and some of us go through some hell, like trauma and abuse and addictions, and those are real. But man, we are so powerful that we can get through all that. And, again, it's about changing that narrative about ourselves.
Again, for our listeners, just, man, you're laying down such beautiful wisdom. And I'd like to share with you a couple of things for our listeners. Don't think there are things like addictions to shopping, food, sex, work, social media, all these things that are taking your attention away from you being the light and love that you are, the power. And that's what this podcast is all about, leadership and love. And one of the things that I'd like to share with you, Todd, you don't know about me, is that I was abused sexually, physically, emotionally, and mentally as a child, and then spent 20 years in the Marines, right? So I just threw PTSD on top of PTSD. And I went through it, right? One of the reasons why I do the work I do is I'm like you. There was 30 years of my life that drugs, alcohol, sex. I was piling it on just to kill the pain and not face that. One of the things I'd like to share with the audience is when I finally turned and faced it, the fear I had of facing it was less and easier than the fear of running from it for all those years. It was crazy to me. Can you talk about that, on how people can face their fear?
Well, it's a decision. You made a decision. You decided, you know what? I'm gonna turn and I'm gonna face this. And what you're really saying is I'm gonna turn and I'm gonna take care of this. I am gonna heal from what I've been through. That was a decision you made. And I think we take this for granted. I think choice is the ultimate power. It's the greatest gift that we have the power to choose. It's what separates us from plants and animals. But unfortunately, we are the only life form that will settle for less. We will actually choose to play small. We will choose to settle for less. Like, you've never heard of a tree growing half as high as it could. How high does a tree grow? It grows as high as it possibly can. It does what it's meant to do. We as human beings, because we have the dignity to choose, we choose to play small, right? So when you made that choice to face your traumas, I mean, that was empowering. And I want your listeners to hear this. Choice is one of the greatest gifts we have. So when I choose to overcome addiction, and that doesn't mean we don't need help. It just means that I'm going to do something about this finally. And that's what you did. And that's powerful.
So, man, you're hitting it out of the park. So for our listeners, he just said two things. One is we have the power to choose, and nothing else in the world does. I also touched real quick. Somebody told me once, grass does an effort to grow. It's just out there growing. It's not thinking, oh, this is tough. It's tough to grow, or it's cloudy. I'm not going to grow today, or it's too sunny. It just flipping grows. And we have that same. We came in with the same ability, right? But the other thing, and I'd like you to talk about this, especially for leaders who think they're in a silo, because one of the things that went off for me a couple of years ago is nobody that's ever accomplished anything did it by themselves. And I can tell you, I'm not here. Yes, I made that decision to turn, but there are too many people to even probably remember at this point who've helped me on that journey. So I'd like you to talk about why community is important, and why as a leader you need to build that, whether you're struggling with addiction, raising children, employees, why it's so important to have community, and how do you help people be brave enough? Because I've worked with clients as well. They're just scared to death and their ego won't let them ask for help.
Yeah. Isaac Newton penned in a letter in 1675 where he stated, if I've been able to see a little further than others, it's by standing on shoulders of giants. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the giants in my life who allowed me to stand on their shoulders so I could see a little further. And there it is. We need to have these mentors, these therapists, these life coaches, these podcast leaders such as yourself in our lives. They're giants, because what they do is when we listen to something like this, we can see a little further, or in other words, our awareness grows. We go, oh my gosh, I can overcome this because of what I was taught. And, when you coming back to the community, I think, Johann Hari in a TED Talk said, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And when we are connected, we're never.
Oh, sorry. Say that one again too, please. That was rich. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but.
No, you're good. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. So really that's where it's at. When we're connected, we're never more fully alive. So we do need community. I mean, but a lot of times people say, well, I don't have a community. Well, then go create it. That's where our power to choose comes in. Go reach out, ask people to be hey, will you mentor me? Will you be my coach? Can I check in with you weekly? Hey, do you want to go to lunch? If you got friends you haven't talked to in a while, then be the one who reaches out and invites them to lunch. That's where we have the power to make a difference, right? I can choose today to connect with my friends instead of me going, well, I'm waiting for my friends to connect with me. Well, then I'll wait all day long. Who knows? And then we'll go, yep, see, they don't like me. No, that's not the case, because they're doing the same thing you're doing right now. So be the one to reach out to them and watch what happens. You're like, you go to lunch with your friends that you haven't met with and, talked to in 5 years. You're like, man, that was one of the greatest lunches. I feel so connected.
So for those of you that are listening and not watching, man, Todd, I love your passion. So for those of you that are listening and not watching, his face got really big in my screen because he leaned in to the camera and he said, build the community, make the choice to have a community. And he's absolutely right. You have the power. This is what we've been talking about. You have the power to choose, and that connection is powerful. And so my next question I want to follow up with that is, and maybe you already have answered it, but what's your advice for people? Because so I've got an employee, and I won't mention a name because he may watch this, but I can tell you that his fear around asking for help, because he doesn't want to look less than or you're not capable, all that crazy stuff we're telling ourselves in our head. What would your advice be to people to be brave enough to just ask?
Well, there's a term in recovery that's thrown around a lot where it says you need to have 20 seconds of insane courage. And sometimes that's what we need, where we pick up that phone, we text a friend where we go, you know what? Hey, I'm reaching out to you because I am in a bad place right now. And I think here's what's interesting. If you flip it back onto the person who's struggling, if I said to you, if a friend reached out to you right now and said they were struggling, would you help them? They would all say, absolutely. So just remember that if you reach out to someone, they're going to want to help you. You're not burdening them. They're not mad that you reached out. So have some insane courage for a few seconds where you pick up that phone, or you dial that number, or you send that text, or you shoot that email out, or you run over to someone's house, whatever it takes. Have that courage, because I promise you that will be the door that's going to lead to change, and it's going to lead you to getting past whatever you're dealing with. So that's my advice with that.
Man, you know what I love about you is you're so wise and so succinct. You just hit the nail on the head. You don't beat around the bush. And I love that. I'm going to steal that one too. Insane courage, right? Even 20 seconds of insane courage. I think I'd love to share this with you, brother to brother. One of the things I share with people is, what's the worst thing that can happen? If you can survive the worst thing that can happen, then take the risk. Right? So if you risk calling somebody and they don't answer, can you live with that? Yeah, because you weren't having a conversation with them before. If they say, no, I'm not going to help you, can you live with that? Yeah, because they weren't helping. Your life didn't change. But it's not like you're taking, rarely are we taking a risk with our life, right? Unless you're talking about drugs and alcohol. And, if you're choosing to do another line of cocaine or, drink another fifth of whiskey. But most of the time, we're not. That insane courage isn't like I said. I spent 20 years in the Marines. And it's all a perspective thing, right? People are like in a frenzy. I say, look, nobody's shooting at us. Just take a breath. Nobody's shooting at us. We're going to come out of this thing alive.
Right.
You've just been a wealth of knowledge, and boy, what a pleasure this has been. I'd like to ask you: is there something that I haven't asked you, or that you haven't covered that you really like to share with our audience?
I mean, there's a lot of things that we could talk about. I think at the end of the day, if I could share one powerful truth to everyone listening right now and watching this, and it's the one truth I share with my clients even on day one when I meet with them. I mean, this is the absolute truth. And here's what I would tell you. The most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize there's nothing wrong with you. Now, people hear that and they go, what? I'll tell this to a drug addict, an alcoholic, and they look at me like, you're crazy. Like, no, I've blown up my life. And here's what this means. To your core, you are good. Yes, you have stuff to work on. Absolutely. We all do. And we always will. But to our core, we are unshakably good. There's nothing wrong with you. But I used to walk around believing I had something wrong with me. Therefore, that led to the behavior of me blowing up my life. And so that is something I love to share because it's the truth. and people are going to wrestle with it. So again, the most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize there's nothing wrong with you. I actually have it on my wall. You can't see it here. My clients sit back here. I have them read it out loud on day one, and they look at me, and 9 out of 10 of my clients will start crying. Like, no one's ever told me that before.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'd like to just share a brief story with you. I just helped lead an all-women's retreat, which was the first time I've done that. And if you'd have told me I was going to do that 5 years ago, I'd have laughed in your face.
Right.
But one of the things I shared with them is I believe we're all perfect right here, right now. Right? Yeah. We're right where we're, and so again, for our listeners, because, and Todd and I, we could do this for a long time, but for our listeners, I want you to understand what he's touching on. And that is, he said, again, very, very powerful wisdom. That is, we're always going to have things we can improve on. But I really believe the same thing, Todd. Right here, right now, we're perfect. We're right where the size we're supposed to be, the shape, the height, the color of hair, without hair, whatever that may be, color of skin, eyes. Seriously, we're exactly perfect right here, right now. And whether it's God, infinite wisdom, source, higher power, Allah, Buddha, I don't care what you call it. I believe we've come here to learn these lessons. And so we're right where we're supposed to be, learning what we're supposed to learn. And to your point, you brought tears to my eyes, brother. And I mean that sincerely when you spoke about, when I started thinking about the people that I got to stand on their shoulders, and I saw a vision of what was possible way past whatever I thought was possible, right? When I look back on my life, it's amazing, and none of us could have planned our lives. Right. And maybe talk about that. I know we've got a couple minutes, and you've got such profound wisdom. I'd like you to talk about kind of your thoughts and philosophy on how the life has transpired. And I believe it all had a purpose to get us here. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think I look at it this way, and I've learned this again from the giants in my life, one of them being James Allen, who wrote the book As a Man Thinketh. It's one of my favorite books. It's my Bible. I read it every single day. But I think life happens for us, not to us. And what I mean by that is even the bad things that we go through. Like, I took my first sip of alcohol when I was 11 years old. That opened up a door of 10 years of drug addiction and alcoholism. I lost a basketball scholarship of it. I was suicidal. I actually even tried to end my life. I overdosed. I blew up relationships. I mean, the list goes on, and you guys can, know all that. But I look back now, and I can tell you it all happened for me. I'm grateful I took that drink at 11. And you want to know why? Because I'm sitting here talking to all of you guys right now. Had I not had that drink, I wouldn't be on this podcast with you guys right now. I wouldn't change it for anything, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone either. So if you've been through a hard time, I promise you there's a lesson you're supposed to learn. I tell this to my clients all the time. Addiction and adversity is the wake-up call to your greatness. It's trying to wake you up, because this isn't you. This isn't who you're supposed to be. You weren't, meant to be sad, depressed, and lonely. That's not what it is. So anyway, I don't know if that answers the question fully, but I'm telling you, I think life happens for us. And when I look at it that way, I wouldn't change a thing. And I'm grateful for it because I get to talk to you guys today.
And so what a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. And again, I want our listeners to catch something he said. In the midst of all of it, and him and I have different lives, but the same experience that's available to all of us. And that is, I'm very aware, Todd, I wouldn't have the empathy or the passion I have to help and serve people had I not been abused as a child. And I had that for like 12 years of my life, right? But it's had influence on my empathy, on my kindness, on my ability to want to serve, on my ability to love unconditionally, because I know what it's like to be like we started at the beginning. You've been there, right? You've been there, done that guy. So am I. And I think I want our listeners to understand a couple things I want to reiterate what Todd has said. This doesn't matter where you started. You have a choice to choose your future. Doesn't matter what's happened to you. You have a choice to choose your future. And when you do that, look back and what was the lesson or the opportunity that you could take from that. And when you realize that, because everybody, and Todd, I'd like you to talk about this a little bit, because I'm sure a lot of your patients, clients have had this experience. Doesn't every one of us have a story that will be the shoulders that somebody else can stand on?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I again, like you said, you've had giants in your life. That's why you are where you're at. I have giants in my life. That's where and maybe this podcast today, for those listening who are in a dark place and struggling, maybe you can stand on our shoulders today and see a little further for a minute. And I'm telling you that alone, that's the awareness we're talking about. That's the awareness that you are great, that you do matter, and that life is worth living. And it's this today's happening for all of us. And if you heard one thing in this podcast today that sparked your heart and your mind, right? You know, the late Tupac Shakur said, I may not change the world, but I will spark the brain that will change the world. And then he goes on to say, isn't that our job, to spark in others how great they are? I mean, that's hopefully what we've done today. And that's, you know, that's why I do what I do. And I'm sure that's why you do what you do. And again, what a blessing it is to be here with you and everyone today.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, you answered one of my questions that I was going to ask. What's your favorite book that you'd recommend? But if you'd repeat that for our audience.
Yeah, it's right here. As a Man Thinketh. Really thin book. It was written in 1903, and it's probably the best book, in my opinion, ever written on the planet. It's the Bible for your mind. And my dad gave this to me when I was in the height of my addiction. I put it on the shelf for 2 years and forgot about it. And when I started turning my life around, I pulled this book out, and I haven't put it down since. It is an amazing book. I would recommend that to anyone.
Thank you very much for that. And before we go, how can people connect with you or reach out? Because you truly are just a gold mine of wisdom. I'm serious. I think that you're a great example of what inspires me to keep, so I'm going to be transparent with you. The last week or so, I've been struggling with, should I keep the podcast going, right? And then here you are. And I want you to know that you've sparked me to continue. No, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, because I think you're just one of these beautiful souls that, I don't even think you probably understand how magnificent and how beautiful and how wise you are until people ask you questions. And it's just poured out of you like this beautiful fountain. And it has come out with love, that love and kindness. And I couldn't not feel you. Just a beautiful experience this has been. So how can people, and I'd like everybody to at least have a conversation with you at some point, because you can't talk to this guy and not love him and not feel better than you started the conversation with. So from my heart, thank you for that. But how can people get a hold of you, Todd?
Well, first, thank you for the kind words. That means a lot. And I'm glad that we've connected in this way. And I feel the same about you. And so I really appreciate that. People, I have a website. It's toddinspires.com. You can go there. I also have a podcast as well. It's called a Belief Cast. I'm on all the major platforms. You just do a search and type in Belief Cast and it'll pull right up. I'm on Instagram. My handle is TS Inspires. And I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can find me there as well. And love to hear from you. You can shoot me. I have an email. It's todd@toddinspires.com. So you can shoot me an email. I'd be happy to answer any questions or direct you in any path that you need to go down.
Oh, that's just beautiful. Thanks for sharing all that. And for those of you listening, we also put all that in the meeting notes. So if you didn't catch it when I see it was going by, it's all going to be in the meeting notes.
Nice.
Todd, again, from the bottom of my heart, man, thank you. You just made my day, and you sparked me to continue. So thank you for all of that. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again for taking the time.
You bet. Thanks for having me. What an honor.
Thanks again for joining us and listening to this episode of Leadership and Love. I would like to challenge you to ask yourself, what's one thing that you heard today that you can implement immediately to improve your leadership and accelerate your growth? If you've gotten value out of this episode or learned something that you can implement today, we'd ask that you please share it with those that you care about. Our goal is to create more leaders who are leading with love.